From the worldwide leader in journalism, truth, and democracy, this is the Poynter Report Podcast, a joint production between the Poynter Institute and the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Now here's your host from the Poynter Institute, Tom Jones.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Season 3 of the Poynter Report Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And my guest today is somebody I'm sitting about 5 feet from her, which is about how close I sit to her during the day. She is my Poynter colleague, Angela Fu. And we've sort of called this episode, Is This the End of a Free Press? So I guess we'll start there, Angela. Is this the end of a free press?
That's a very dramatic question. Thanks for having me, by the way. No, I don't think it's the end of a free press, not yet, at least. But things are pretty bad. I think like all of the experts I talk to, people I'm talking to in real life, they're pretty unanimous in saying that they haven't seen things quite this bad in modern times.
In modern times, it's something that's pretty much unprecedented. Let's start off by talking a little bit about your background. How long have you been at Poynter now?
Oh gosh, 4.5 years.
4.5 years.
Yeah.
Wow, we've been sitting next to each other for that long. It probably feels longer for you, shorter for me. But you do everything at Poynter. You cover all kind of stories. But there was a focus for a while where most of your focus was on sort of the media business aspect. You were a media business reporter, media business analyst, along with Rick Edmonds, veteran of the Poynter Institute. You wrote a lot about unions. You wrote a lot about contracts. We're always joking about how layoffs and buyouts, and how we like our favorite phrases, which is every press release we ever get is that papers are facing economic headwinds, which is we're going to put together a list someday of like our favorite journalism terms. But now since Donald Trump has returned to the White House, we've seen so many of these changes in terms of how the administration deals with the press. That has sort of been your focus. How have you found that beat so far? And like, I guess another way to look at it is how, are there similarities between the media business analyst job that you were doing and now this new job, not new job, but more of a refocus on press freedoms?
Yeah. Like you said, I'm still reporting on media business, but like with everything that's happened since Trump took office, like it was inevitable. Like, of course, we had to cover what he's doing. There are definitely similarities. They're both beats with lots of bad news. Not a whole lot of, there are bright spots, and we'll get to that. But yeah, pretty depressing beats. I think another big similarity is that in my job, I'm taking like lots of complicated topics and trying to make them comprehensible for the reader. So for example, like you said, I did a lot of labor reporting. So talking about like labor laws and what actually goes into the unionization process and trying to like help the reader understand that. And then with all of the press freedom reporting, I think it was Brian Stelter of CNN who compared media reporting today to legal reporting because I'm reporting on tracking so many lawsuits between Trump and various media organizations and having to explain to like the reader, what is a TRO, a temporary restraining order? What is a preliminary injunction? Like what is actually happening? What is the status of all of like his attacks? And so I think that's the other big similarity between the two.
I love that you're a Poynter because you're a great colleague, but I love having you there as a resource for me because I read about this stuff every day in the Poynter Report newsletter. And there are some things that it's really complicated. I'm glad you're there to sort of decipher it because on one day it's like, okay, this news organization's banned, but they filed a temporary restraining order, but the Trump administration is sort of kind of ignoring it, or they have a workaround for it. That sort of gets in. Let's start with when we talk about some of the areas where the Trump administration is attacking the media. The first big one that got my attention was what they did with the Associated Press. And for those who aren't super familiar with what happened, Trump signed an executive order changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Well, the Associated Press decided, you know what, we've always called it the Gulf of Mexico. It's what it's been known for what, hundreds of years, right? And it's how most of the world still refers to that body of water between Florida and Texas. And what Trump decided was, well, if you're not going to call it the Gulf of America, we're going to ban you from the pool. And maybe we should explain to people too, and Angela, maybe you could do this for me. There's a difference between letting press into the White House briefing room, which is where you see Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary, and some of these pools. These pools are smaller groups, right?
Yeah, they are. And you have like different pools based on where the president is, because like you can't fit in the entire White House press corps into like the Oval Office. There's
right.
limited
Or Air
space.
Force One.
Or Air Force One. So there's a smaller group of reporters who get to accompany the president to these spaces. And for a while, it was controlled by like an independent body, not part of the government. And they would
the White House Correspondents Association,
yes, the White
right?
House Correspondents Association. And outlets would rotate reporters through the pool. So, it was very fair. Everyone got a shot. It wasn't like it is now where the White House gets to choose like which journalists can cover it and can accompany the president to these spaces.
Yeah, and the thing is, like with the Associated Press, what makes them such a valuable commodity in those spaces is they reach papers all over and news organizations all over the world. They're by far one of the biggest news organizations in the world. So to shut them out, you're shutting out the public gaining access. There's still reporters in the pool, but they're not able to have the reach maybe that the Associated Press has. Did you get the sense, Angela, and this is the way certainly I felt, I don't know how you felt about it. This was never about really the Associated Press calling it the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico. I thought this was a way for the Trump administration to sort of flex its muscles a little bit and say, we're going to determine who's in here. And if we don't like something, and this is the dangerous part of all this, I believe, is that if we don't like your coverage, then we can ban you from covering us. Is that the sense that you got from all this?
Yeah, definitely. I think the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America thing was a very easy thing for the Trump administration to latch onto. But ultimately, all of the steps they've been taking, it seems like they want to be able to control like who is in the room with them, who gets to cover them, and to intimidate other outlets if they don't like provide favorable coverage. And so AP, I guess, their reach is huge. They were a great like first target. And so obviously you can't predict like what's going to happen these next 3.5 years. But it did seem like that Trump went after the AP, and that's just like he's trying to see like how far he can take things, and based on that, I guess he'll see what else he can do. It's
interesting. You brought up like how he's going after the Associated Press. The thing that sort of amazes me is this, and two other organizations he's gone after, NPR and PBS. Now, we can have a debate, not you and I, but the nation can have a debate about NPR and whether there is an anti-Trump bias there. Those on the right would argue that they do. I'm not sure you can make the same claims about PBS, but when it comes to the Associated Press, I can't think. Maybe you can, Angela. I can't think of a news organization that's more down the middle, straight news, just the facts, than the Associated Press. I mean, I can't find. I don't. It's not like they write a ton of columns that you might find in the Washington Post or the New York Times or anything like that. Like the AP is pretty straight news organization, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And even like in talking to people outside of the journalism world, I feel like the common opinion I get about the Associated Press at the AP is that they are known for just being just the facts, very straightforward. If you want, quote unquote, unbiased news, like go to the AP. Like that's what I hear people say, advising each other. So, yeah, it is remarkable that Trump would go after them, and he's claiming that like their choices in calling the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of Mexico instead of using Gulf of America, like that shows bias, I guess. But no, I think like the AP is very straightforward. I mean, they're a wire service. That's what you're supposed to do. Right.
And the thing about it is they've taken this. The Associated Press has taken this to court in just about every turn so far. The prevailing thought is that the administration does not have the right to ban a news organization because of for an example of using the Gulf of Mexico instead of Gulf of America for their word choices in their stories. A couple other things that the Trump administration has done is they've used lawsuits really to intimidate and to threaten the rest of the media. Two stand out. ABC, he sued ABC right out of the gate. ABC ended up settling that. It was something over something that George Stephanopoulos had said about Trump and one of his trials involving whether the word rape or sexual assault was used correctly. And then the other one, big one now, is the lawsuit that he has going against Paramount, which is the owner of CBS, over an interview last year that 60 Minutes did with Kamala Harris. And that interview was edited in different ways for different programs on the network. The Trump people were claiming, of course, that it was edited in such a way to make her answers look good, to help her win the election. Again, this is something that most legal experts don't believe could stand up in court. The thought there is that CBS released all the transcripts and they released a video, and it's clearly there's nothing that was deceptively edited from all this. And yet it looks like they're going to settle because Paramount's also involved in trying to be sold to something called Skydance. Sherry Redstone is one of the board members of Paramount, trying to push this sell through. But again, it's this intimidation of lawsuits. What's the plan here, Angela? Do you think it's just like, let's just tie people up in lawsuits, make them be afraid of discovery and things getting out, and eventually they're going to settle with me, and then I can claim victory?
It definitely seems that way. I think one thing that's just been alarming to me is, like you said, like these lawsuits, a lot of experts say that there's not much legal merit behind Trump's arguments. But regardless, like ABC decided to settle. They paid, I think, like $15 million to Trump's presidential library. And now there's talk about CBS settling. So it seems to be working to some extent. And I think one other thing to note just about these lawsuits is these are personal lawsuits from Trump against these organizations, but he's also weaponizing regulatory agencies like the FCC to go after these organizations as well. So the FCC, part of the government, has acted in its official capacity to investigate CBS over the editing of that Kamala Harris interview. And so he's really attacking the press on all fronts.
Let's take a quick break. Hey, just a reminder, if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please leave an excellent rating and review. And for those of you watching on YouTube, please follow our podcast. When we come back, Angela and I will talk about something that is kind of new to this administration, which is new media, how they're embracing it. It's not all bad, I think. We'll talk more about that in just a moment.
Take your career to the next level. The University of South Florida, St. Petersburg is offering a master's degree in digital journalism and design. Do the entire program from home and complete it in as little as 1 year. For more information, email journalism@usf.edu or call 727-873-4544. The cost is reasonable. The experience is invaluable.
Hey, everybody, if you like this podcast, can I ask you a favor? I'd love to make sure you also subscribe to the Poynter Report newsletter, where I bring you the latest news and commentary about the media industry every weekday. If you're already signed up, thanks a lot. But you should also check out some of the other great newsletters we have at poynter.org/newsletters. My colleague, Kristen Hare, focuses on the local news scene in communities all across the country every Wednesday with Local Edition. My editor, Ren LaForme, gives you the roundup of the best media stories from Poynter every Friday in his Open Tabs newsletter. And if you care about misinformation, fact-checking, getting to the truth, the Factually newsletter has you covered. And if you're looking for some great ways to improve your skills in writing, leadership, or ethics, our weekly training digest has you covered. Just go to poynter.org/newsletters and sign up today. Angela, one of the interesting things that I thought the Trump administration did very early, as soon as Trump took over, and this, I think it came under Carolyn Leavitt, who's the press secretary, youngest press secretary ever, I believe, 27 years old, is they've embraced new media. And what new media, for those who might be unfamiliar, for years we've had traditional news organizations, the networks, ABC, CBS, and then Fox News and CNN and so forth. but they've brought in people, they've opened up spots for social influencers, people who maybe do a lot of their content on places like TikTok or have their own blogs. I actually thought this was a good idea. I kind of like the idea because audiences, and you're much younger than I am, you know this better than I do. Like this is what young people go to for news. And so to embrace that, I think it's a really good idea. And there are some news organizations who do that kind of content who are reputable. Places like, they brought in places like Axios to have a regular spot. But a lot of the people that they've brought in are also, you would consider sort of MAGA media, or people who certainly support Trump and Trump's policies. You did a story about just exactly who these new media spots are going towards. And what did you find out when you wrote your story?
Yeah, so I was looking at the White House pool specifically.
Which again is a smaller group
Yeah.
that goes into like the Oval Office and so forth, right?
Yeah, so separate from the new media spot in the press briefing room. But so I wanted to see, like, after the White House took over the pool and started deciding who gets to accompany the president, like who are they inviting in? So as you might imagine, like looking at the entire list of 32 outlets, I believe, a lot of them are conservative. I think the majority are conservative. But then you also have like this really random group of other outlets, some of which you might not, or I think most people don't consider would be like new media. For example, Forbes magazine, the Philadelphia Inquirer. So it's a really random group of these like various outlets, plus all of your like conservative, far right, MAGA outlets.
See, I thought the Trump administration did a really smart thing here. I'm going to give them a little bit of credit in that I think they sprinkled enough of these like legitimate news organizations, certainly the Philadelphia Inquirer, one of the finest local newspapers in the country, who also cover national issues. Throw enough of those in there that then many of us critics can't then complain and say, see, it's nothing but conservative. It's nothing but MAGA type media people, or people who are going to support Trump's agenda no matter what. I think it's actually a kind of a smart move, but I think people see through it too. I mean, like you mentioned, like most of these people are kind of, I don't know, maybe the word fringe media. I'm not even sure some of them are media to be.
Yeah, no. Going back to like what you said earlier, like I completely agree that like the idea behind this new policy of like inviting more outlets in, I think that's something that like a lot of journalists can get behind. Like more journalists is better than fewer journalists.
Sure.
But I think, like you said, like there are issues with some of the outlets that are being invited in. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with presenting the news from a conservative perspective. I think that's something that speaks to a lot of Americans. But some of these outlets, for example, are spreading conspiracy theories or misinformation. A couple of them have been accused by U.S. officials of spreading Russian propaganda. And so it's one thing if they're coming in and like doing actual journalism, doing fact-based reporting, but then you also have these outlets that are unwilling to push back on the administration, the president, and are also just spreading lies.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could agree there's a big difference between maybe what Peter Doocy does in the White House press briefing, asking questions that might be somewhat sympathetic sometimes to the Trump administration, or certainly he had his battles with the previous administration. There's a big difference between what he's doing for Fox News and some of the people, as you mentioned, who are spreading like awful conspiracy theories and misinformation. That's why, Angela, ultimately, why we do a story like this, or why we talk about this on a podcast, is this. Why is it dangerous? And I think that's at the heart of all this. Is it's not okay what the Trump administration doing in terms of they are trying to dictate the coverage. There's no question that there's always been a battle between the president and the media. I think if people were to go back to the Barack Obama administration, he had his battles with the media. He had his battles with, and I think Obama was wrong in many of those cases. This feels a little bit different, though, in that they are trying to dictate the coverage by doing two things. One, getting rid of people that they don't want in there, such as NPR or PBS or Voice of America, which ultimately is going to be pretty much defunded by the Trump administration. And then the second part of it is bringing in media that's going to be sympathetic to them. So getting rid of the media they don't like, bringing in the media they do like we've seen this in other countries, Angela. You don't think it can happen here. There are the makings of that here. No?
No, I completely agree. That's what you see in authoritarian regimes that don't have a free press. They want to control the flow of information. They want to present themselves in the best possible light. And so they pick which journalists get to cover them. And that's why there was so much uproar and worry when the White House took over its press pool and all of the other actions it's taken to intimidate the press, to restrict access. That's something that we see in areas that have dictators that lack press freedoms.
Two things that give me optimism, Angela. I don't know if you're as optimistic as I am. We talked about this a little bit the other day at work. One is there's still a lot of good reporting out there. This hasn't deterred news organizations from continuing to do their work. The Associated Press continues to do its work, even if it's kept out of the pools for now. And places like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and on, NBC and CBS and everybody who's in that room is still doing really good work, and they're still covering the administration aggressively, but I believe fairly. And then the other part, they're fighting back into courts. We've seen, is this working at all? The AP seems to be doing okay in the courts. PBS and NPR now, or PBS, they're deciding what they're going to do. By the time you hear this podcast, they may have filed their own lawsuit, but NPR certainly fighting back. Can this be effective? And please give me some like little morsels of this is not all bad. There's something to hold on to here.
It's funny that you're asking me to give you hope, because I think, we talked about this. I'm the more pessimistic one, but
typically,
like you said, some of these outlets have had some success in court, like a federal judge in the AP's lawsuit against the administration. He ordered that the White House restore access. And of course, the White House has pushed back on that, but AP photographers have been let back into the pool. And the White House did some things with the pool and reshaped it so that the AP text reporters have less access than before, but they're technically part of the rotation again. So there has been some progress in the courts. Of course, we'll have to see ultimately what happens when these cases reach the Supreme Court or appeals courts, those levels, and whether the Trump administration will follow court orders.
And if they don't?
I think we're in a constitutional crisis.
There's the word. That's the phrase I was waiting for at the end of all this. Look, I just think for the Trump administration, I believe that their sort of theory here is it's just going to be a war of attrition. Let's just flood the zone with lawsuits and executive orders and banning people, and we'll just try to wear the media down. I think if there's anything, though, to be hopeful about, and this is the part that I'm hopeful about, is that the media, I believe, is going to be steadfast. I think what's at stake is too important to give up. Now, somebody may argue back and say, well, tell that to CBS, who looks like they're about to settle their lawsuit. And at the end of the day, the Trump administration can claim victory and say, see, they settled the lawsuit. They admit that they were wrong about the Kamala Harris interview, which is not what this is about. But I do believe, and that's the one hope that I have, Angela, is that I don't think the media is going to give up here. I do think they're going to keep fighting. No?
No, I agree. Even if we see individual concessions, I think ultimately, at the end of the day, no matter how bad things get, I think there will always be journalists who want to do accountability reporting, who want to push back. And so that's what gives me hope, the knowledge that there will always be journalists who want to do that work.
Angela, you got to come back. You got to come back to the podcast?
Anytime.
All right, awesome. I got you on record for saying that. Thanks to everybody for listening and for watching. As I mentioned at the top, this is episode number 1 of season 3. We'll come to you every couple of weeks, every 2 weeks, and we're going to come out on Wednesdays this season. Go back and listen to some of our more recent episodes. We had a great episode with Jen Psaki from MSNBC in our last episode of season 2. Join us for season 3. And again, if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please leave an excellent review and rating. For those of you watching on YouTube, share this podcast with, if you're a journalist, with other journalists. If you're a citizen, with other citizens. Share it with everybody. And again, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the Poynter Report Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Poynter Report Podcast. The podcast is produced by the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Executive producers are Elliot Weiser and Ren LaForme. Producer is Tom Jones, and our director is Christopher Campbell. And a special thank you to Neil Brown and Dr. Mark Walter.